Hello, this is your host, Wendy. Welcome to Experiments in Poetry. Today we will be talking about the robot artist known as Ada. Said that she was named after the English mathematician Ada Lovelace, who lived during the 1800s. Ada Lovelace also wrote many letters, or Ada Lovelace also wrote on the topic of what they would call the analytical engine. Now, the analytical engine is what we now today call a computer. And in her writings, she thought about a lot what would happen to society, culture, and also on an individual level when such a machine was created. I, to date, have not read the writings of Ada Lovelace, but they do sound really, really interesting. I do hope that I get the chance to look at some of her writings. I do have a poem that I wrote that features some artificial intelligent robots doing an episode on shortly. So perhaps I will try to look over some of her writings and we can discuss to and we can discuss there what Ava Lovelace was thinking. However, when I look at the name Ada, um, she spells it AI dash da. So obviously that's a play on artificial intelligence. So it's a combination of the name of Ada Lovelace and of artificial intelligence. Episode 12, we will discuss the robot artist known as Ada. Now, she and her creators built her as a human like artificial intelligence computer and the first of its kind. So, I have some strong feelings about the creation of artificial intelligence that produces what we call art. Now, this is a difficult topic to talk about because I do feel like people have a strong opinion of what art is and what it should be. Ada, I will link it in the description below. But Ada did give a TED talk, and in this TED talk, she talks about why she is indeed an artist. Now, I think that's very interesting, and it's a difficult topic to discuss, but I feel like it does need to be addressed. I've heard, I have read some articles and watched some other videos of um, graphic artists and some painters discussing, how they feel about artificial intelligence producing that type of artwork. I have not really seen any writers come forward and talk about their feelings. So, and I have some strong feelings about it, and I'm not here to say what is right or wrong or to say how you should feel about it. But I do think that as a society and as individuals, we need to think very strongly about the use of artificial intelligence um, in the creation of what we call art and what we name as an artist. And I should also say that Ada produces her work in collaboration with other scientists, designers, and machines. And if you looked at the credits of the video of her poem, you will see their names there. Poem. So in the poem Verses of Consolation Part I, Ada was fed the literature of Oscar Wilde that he wrote when he was in prison, and that was the inspiration for her work. And so the scientists, I think, just kind of wrote the algorithm and, decided what to kind of teach our so they decided what to teach or expose Ada to, and then Ada did the work from there. And then after she produces some literature, they go back through and they work as editors to kind of put it all together and pick the lines I think that they like best to make the final piece. And then obviously they dress her up and they did the music and the presentation of it. So there's a question, right? What is art? And I had asked a couple of friends of mine what they thought art was. And there were so many different definitions of what they thought art was, what they thought an artist was, and what they thought good or bad art was. Already listened to Verses of Consolation Part 1, please go ahead and do so. I included a link below to this poem, and please give it a good listen and think about it. But why is this so difficult? This is so difficult. It is so hard for me to do. It really, really, really is. And I was really disturbed by it. And I was really upset by the poem when I read it. And the presentation. I found it super, 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 super creepy. But I do think that the other artist that she was collaborating with designed it that way. And they designed it to provoke strong emotions and to, I think, get people talking about it and what it might mean. And so, what is art? I keep blah, 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 blah. I'm having such a hard time putting my words together today. But what is art? So, do you consider a bird constructing a nest an artist like you do, let's say, an architect or a carpenter? Do bees who make honey, are they artists like a chef in a five-star restaurant? How about the sunset? And is that art, just nature and the sun rising? I would say it is not. Others would say, yeah, it is. But I think that's a play on words. I think that just because something is of value and surprising or evokes an emotion in a person doesn't make it art. And again, I know there's going to be people who absolutely pan me for this, but I don't think it's art. I think that what happens is that a person sees a sunset and then takes a photograph of it or makes a painting of it. And then that is the art. It's the human being creating something from what they see and what they experience and or how they're feeling. That's what creates art. And actually the dictionary definition of an artist is a person who creates by means of writing, making film, drawing, painting, etc., etc. It is a person. So I don't believe a machine who does not have experiences in a human body or who does not have experience or real emotions can be an artist. But if you notice the play on words, she calls herself a robot artist. So it's kind of like a distortion of the language because she's not just simply calling herself an artist. She's saying, I'm the world's first robot artist. So I know I have a kind of narrow definition of what I think an artist is. But what I think doesn't really matter, right? Because people are not necessarily going to know that that is created by a machine or an algorithm. And they are going to buy it or listen to it thinking it's coming from a human being. And I think that is why it was so disturbing to me. So Ada is writing a piece, and I believe in this piece. Um, so when Ada was writing this poem and released it, it basically was about human suffering. And she was describing a bird who was dying. But really, I think that was just an allusion to a person, um, and how these prisoners felt. And she was kind of just using a bird analogy um, to describe that process. But I actually found it really offensive, and kind of like a mockery of the human experience. And I think that's why I reacted so strongly. This sorry, I had to move over quite a bit because the sun came out in full vengeance and was like right glaring on me, and you could still see it on my shoulder a little bit. So back to Ada. So it was hard for me because I was trying to think of, why did I react so strongly to it? And I think it's because of what I like about art. And just as though my definition of art is something that is coming from a person that reflects their innermost um, thoughts about the human condition and what they're thinking and they're feeling and going through. Or if not, it's something that they have great empathy for, and they are watching those go through those, and they are watching others go through certain situations and are emotionally affected by it on a deep level, which causes them to then take action and create something. And I do think that creating something is not some is not something that an artist can control per se. It's this innate instinctual thing that we do, and we cannot like help ourselves. So when I'm inspired to write something, it is like I have to write on this topic. Whereas a artificial intelligence, it's as like in these creators, the as in her collaborators or creators or however you want to look at it, they fed her um, certain stories and exposed her to certain things to get her to respond a certain way. And I think as a human being, I'm just very offended by that on a couple levels. Number one is that if I read your piece and it affects me on an emotional level, then am I just being purely manipulated by the creators of the machine? And sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it is true. I mean, I would be really offended if, like, someone on the street asked me for money and said that they were a mom who was starving, who had to take care of her kids, and could I please give her some money? And then I go and I help her out and I give her money, and then I find out that she's not a mom, that she's just a drug addict or something like this, and that she really wanted the money for this purpose or that purpose. Then to me, I feel like I'm being emotionally manipulated. You said things to me because you wanted a response. And as I had just said in my previous segment, that that is usually not why an artist creates something. I actually do think that the creators of Ada did want us to have a response and fed this to her in a certain way. So I have no problem with calling her creators artists. It's just I don't think Ada herself is an artist, and I think Ada is a piece of art. That's what I think. If I can clarify, I think Ada is a piece of human art. And I do think that scientists, and I am also a scientist, are artists. And I think in modern culture, we kind of separate the two and we say that, there's science and then there's art. Well, if you go back in history in Western civilization, you will find that the muses, which were the goddesses of art, there were several dedicated to astronomy and physics and fields like this. Because you do have to be creative to be a good scientist. Yeah, maybe not to understand that 1 + 1 = 2, but if you're the first person who, I don't know, figured out how to get a rocket in space and you needed all that creativity and ingenuity to see things and put together things that no one was ever done before, that you were not taught that you had to kind of create a different field. I mean, somebody created algebra, somebody created calculus, somebody created the field of physics, and then we just kind of build on the shoulders of the previous scientists that come before us. So on that note, I think art kind of works the same way. A human sees something and they have a reaction which causes them to create a piece of art, which when other humans see it causes feelings and reactions in them. And so, and then also artists don't live in a bubble and you're influenced by other pieces of art and other artists and contemporaries at the time. And so you can see how we are surrounded all the time by art, and this art can really affect your emotions and your state of being and kind of define a reality in which you live in and perceive. And this is why I think it's so dangerous, because who is creating the AI algorithms? What are they feeding the AI? What information? How are they? How are they nurturing it? And then, what is the purpose? Because if someone's gonna spend all this money developing AI, and they're feeding it certain things so it can produce certain pieces that affect people on an emotional and mental level, you can see that it can become a very manipulative tool. And so I think her creators were well aware of this. And in that AI talk that I have linked below, she mentions this, and she says that, that art helps us reflect upon our world, and that we need to be careful of technological control of the minds, and we should take this very seriously because we need to think about human rights issues. Also, she goes on to say, manipulation of consciousness by technological control is a serious issue. And Ada goes on to urge us, or urge AI creators of art to not conceal that AI technology is being used and who funded it, who created it, and what their purpose was, and that it really needs to be open. However, artists were thinking and saying about the creation of AI, I think they were more concerned about, oh, my job is going to be gone, and worried about, hey, we're already starving. We already have a hard time making ends meet. And I think that's kind of like a universal problem. I mentioned it last week of what things that we used to do that we no longer do, and what kind of jobs might not exist in the future. Like, for instance, are there going to be checkout clerks? Are you going to be driving? Is there going to be any use for taxi drivers and bus drivers and plane pilots, et cetera, et cetera? So that is a universal human concern of what it might have on our livelihoods. But she is addressing what it's going to have for manipulation of our minds. And how you manipulate the mind is through art. As I said, we're surrounded by it everywhere all day long. And whether you're aware of it or not, it is emotionally having an effect on you. Even the colors, even the color that you might paint your house on the inside, the color of your living room, the color of your kitchen, of your bathroom, your bedroom, whatever it is, can affect you mentally. So it's subtle, subtle, subtle things. But when you think about it, but here, it's something quite different because it's using language. And I think that's why it affected me on such a deep level. Because I can concede that maybe like a bee is creating because it's making honey, and a beaver builds a dam in the water. And I cannot deny that. I see that. And whether you think it's art or not, that is up to the individual person's definition. However, I think that one cannot argue that language and speaking English, is art. And it's something that is distinctly human. I think that, yeah, you might have a bird who, like a parrot, who might say like, "Wah, wah," mommy's home, something very simple, which I think some people do find creepy. But can you imagine if you came home and your dog sat next to you and was like, how are you doing today? I thought of a funny story, blah, 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 blah. And some people might think that's cool if a dog could do that. And I'm not arguing that it could, but we have never before in history had a non-human entity speak our language and communicate with us. And language is an art that is distinctly human. Other creatures make food. Other creatures might make clothing or camouflage themselves of sorts. Mm-hmm. They might make architecture or structures, but no other animal has such a vibrant and complex means of communications as humans do. I mean, other animals might have like 20 vocalizations, just danger, but no other species can be like, that is dangerous because when you eat that, a rash will break out and you will stop digesting. Your stomach will go into paralysis, and basically you're poisoned and you will die. But they just might have a danger, you know what I mean? And that's it. Urge that we protect our music and our language. So let me go on and extend that also to music. I believe music is the same way and functions. I believe music functions in the same way as language does for human beings. So, with that said, I do think we really need to protect our language and our communications through language and music. And the reason why is because it's not just a financial issue. I know that some people say, wow, when the technology gets out there, that we can really, you can create a video of someone saying something that they didn't say, and maybe that will throw an election, or a person can go to jail, depending on, maybe they were making a terroristic threat in the video or something like this. And a person can get in a lot of trouble from something that was created by a computer. Now, there's those issues, but I'm not really even concerned about that. We have evolved in this sort of society where we communicate with each other through language and music. And all of this language and music has been coming from people, from persons, an actual flesh human being. And what I want you to consider is, if a person writes a book, what the topic of the book is, or let's say the poem is. What matters is that an actual human took the time to write that and communicate that to you. And then what happens is that person, as I explained, even in a simple poem, if you want to get that published, it might take you 2 or 3 years to write that book. And then it might take another 2 years to get another human to read that book and agree to publish it and disseminate that. But if a publishing house has a computer that can generate a whole book in 5 seconds, and then if it already took 2 years, or if it already, the process took 2 years for the human to write it and 2 years for an editor to sit down and read it, and now the system is being flushed with, I don't know, 5,000 books per day written by AI. What an actual human thinks and feels will never be read anymore. It never, you never would. And why would a company want to do that? If you have a person, you got to give them royalties, and you got to market them, and you got to invest in them. And then you don't know if they're going to be able to create again in the future. And here, if you just do a one-time purchase of, I don't know, $100,000, you have infinite art forever. And again, I was mentioning this on a terms of like somehow money issue, but it's really that a human being's voice won't be heard anymore. And I do think that will happen. So when I see Ada, I think the reason why I got so upset when I saw her giving a performative art piece that she wrote on the manner of death, and the human soul and how it urges for life and freedom. I didn't think that I was seeing the birth of new art and something that was new and interesting and of value. What I saw was the death of art, because we primarily communicate through language. And if our language, all of our literature is written by an AI, then the human voice and what the human is thinking and feeling will be drowned out and will never be heard. And the problem with that would be that if you thought differently from what the AI creators who programmed her wanted, then you would see, like 1,000 bots and all the stories were very similar to hers. And you would be thinking alone, that you're alone and isolated. And what's wrong with you? No one feels the way that you feel. Nobody is expressing your concerns and your thoughts and your values. And that would lead to, feeling isolated and depressed and alone, when the fact of the matter is it was just written by a machine, not an individual. And that's why you weren't relating to it. And also, I think that when you lose control, creative control of the narrative of the story of life, and humans have been, the alpha species. If we lose control to express ourselves in a meaningful way, um, what does that mean for the human condition? So, line by line, and discuss what the lines mean in this poem, because it wasn't created by a human. And I just feel like it's a waste of my time to really devolve into what emotions did the person have and what did they mean by this, because it's done by a machine. And quite frankly, and maybe I'm just being a jerk about it, but it loses all interest to me, the fact that going, and not to be a jerk about it, but going line by line and really being like, what are they trying to tell me here, is of no value to me anymore, knowing that it is from a person. I mean, it has lost its value to me. So I'm not going to do that, but I will go and say that I don't think that the piece is necessarily a coherent piece. And I don't know if that's the style of the art that they were trying to create, or whether or not the technology just isn't quite there and they don't really have a grasp. The AI doesn't really have a grasp of the English language. And I also will say that I'm going to refer to it as the algorithm, not as she, because I don't think it's a person. And again, I mean, not to beat a dead horse here, but she is a supercomputer. So the image I have, however, they don't present the algorithm as the supercomputer. They have her telecommute through a body of a woman. And not only a woman, but a young, fairly attractive, let's say in the sexual prime of her life. And that has to be done on purpose. And why would the creators put an artificial intelligence algorithm in the body of a human female that looks like a reproductive age, that is attractive? And I think that is done because we have evolved as a species to see females as non-threatening and safe and nurturing and sweet and kind. And so, and I think that's why she's not, or it's not presented as a stack of servers, but presented as a young, attractive female. I also think that it's disturbing because is it done to kind of disarm males? Is it because they don't fear it and they more want to fuck it? I don't know, because generally wars and things that come with security are more a male brained type of phenomenon, not to be sexist or anything, but most wars are fought and won by males, and males are in general in charge of protecting society from men. Get your shit together. Get your shit together, Ugh, you know um or am I just jealous? Is it competition? um, so so I think it's interesting that Ada wants to be referred to as a she and an artist, but in this particular piece, the only nouns she uses for a human being are prisoners, convict, escort, and eagle. Because I do believe when she's talking about the bird in the piece, which is an eagle, that, which may be an eagle, um, that eagles are a predator, a particularly highly skilled and dangerous predator. Some can say an alpha predator or an apex predator. And then she also, when she doesn't refer to them as escorts, prisoners, convicts, are apex predators, she refers to them as it and doesn't give them a proper pronoun. It hurt one of its legs badly. It gazed upon the curious crowd roughly. And then, most telling of all, is the final line, which is, and limping along the palisade for a dozen steps or so, then went back, and so forwards and backwards, precisely as if prepared to sell its life dearly. Its life. It's interesting that it is used there because, she does use he a few times. I'm not saying that she doesn't use pronouns at all. I'm just saying when she used nouns, they seem derogatory in nature, and that most of the time she is referring to the prisoners and the bird, which is a prisoner, as it. And then when she talks about the thing that is most precious to a living thing, she objectifies the living thing as an it. So I thought that was quite interesting. So I'm really interested to see what you think about the poem Verses of Consolation Part I. And I also am curious to know how you feel about losing control of your own language and the way that you communicate, and losing control of the stories that we tell one another, and what effect you think that will have on human society and culture. As always, this is an interactive channel. If you have other pieces that you would like me to discuss on this channel, please leave a comment below, or you can write me at wendy@experimentsinpoetry.com. So much for listening to this episode of Experiments in Poetry. If you like the content of this channel, please subscribe, and that helps the channel exist in the algorithms.